Hello and good day to our listeners and viewers out there. My name is Tawa Falabi. Thank you for joining us again today for the fourth episode of Arts Management in Africa, debate, discourses, and practices. We have been, for the past 4 weeks, I believe, really drilling down and focusing on the practice and the doing and the knowledge around art management within the context of Africa. We have been reminded that Africa is not just one thing. And as we speak about the continent, as we continue to think about art management and its practice and its knowledge, that we have to understand the varieties of expressions and experiences and cultures in the 54 countries that make up the continent. We also need to recognize that within those 54 varieties of cultures and practices, that we have shared identities, shared understanding. And so in this series, we've really taken it to heart to really speak, to give examples and bring experts and practitioners who are really interested and working on day to day when it comes to art management in Africa. So today we're going to be focusing on cultural policy and management in Africa, and we have two guests, which I will be introducing shortly. But I want to mention that I'm dialing in from the territories of the Nahiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis nations. Today, also for us in Canada, yesterday was our election. And so today we welcome sort of a new government or the continuation of the existing party that has been in power. I want to recognize that because the reality is that these things, they shape whatever we're doing. They shape the policies, they shape the life of an artist, they shape the cultural institutions, art and culture sector, they shape the creative industries. And we want to recognize that. And want to say thank you to all of you that have been dialing in and tuning in. And then I'll pass it to Natasha, my co-host.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Taiwo. Appreciate it. My name is Natasha Amaek. I am an artist, an Afro-Caribbean artist, producer, director, and also many other things. But today I'm a co-host. I'm excited for this next session that we have with our guests. And I'm calling in from Ajax, Ontario, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I want to mention that special thanks to all our partners. Thanks to HowlRound for believing in this vision and working with us. Thanks to the Center for Socially Engaged Theater at the University of Regina. It's a center that I direct. Thanks to the Pan-African Creative Exchange PACE for the amazing work on the continent and the diaspora. Thanks to Theatre Ministry International and its social enterprise mobile research lab for their partnership, and to Kininso Creative and to Lasite at the University of Regina. This series won't be possible without this partnership, and more we know that we can only do things when we come together as a united front. So I want to say thank you to all of them. So today we're talking about cultural policy, and we're going to be drilling down into the day-to-day practice, and also really looking at the players when it comes to art management within cultural policy and management within the context of Africa, and particularly within the context of our guests in terms of where they're working and their day-to-day. So today we have Hajarat Haji Ali, the Executive Director of Center QDance and QDance School from Nigeria. And we have Kevin Kimani Kahuro from Kenya International Theatre Festival from Kenya. Both of them were going to be diving in together to have conversation. They have so much experience, and the kind of work that they do is really remarkable. So we're going to be gleaning from them and taking some insights as regards some of the questions and some of the thoughts that we have prepared, and that's going to be evolving as we come as we get in conversation with them. So with that, I'd love to just get both of them to introduce themselves. We'll start with Haji, and then we'll pass it on to Kevin. So over to you, Haji. Just introduce yourself, and then from there we'll pass it on to Kevin.
Right, thank you very much, Taiwo. My name is Hajarat Ali. Everyone called me Haji, so Haji is just fine. I'm currently calling in from Lagos, Nigeria. I am the executive director of the QDance Center, also the executive director of the Q School, both based in Lagos. And I'm also an arts administrator / manager. It's nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Haji. Kevin.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Kimani Kahuro. I'm the founder of the Kenya International Theatre Festival, and I'm currently also the Programs and Business Development Manager at Kenya Cultural Center that houses the Kenya National Theatre. I'm glad to be here. I'm in arts management, and I'm calling in from Edinburgh, just visiting for the Arts Festival Summit.
Amazing. So in Edinburgh right now, my goodness. Beautiful. It's very timely for us to be having this conversation, because especially you're there for the Arts Summit. Maybe Kevin, you want to start. What's your journey into art management? How did it start? What was the process like for you?
Thank you very much for the question. As many of us in Africa, we've found ourselves in art management because we've started something and we've learned on the job, and we're working towards a certain vision, a certain passion, and that's how I found myself into art management. Though from an early age, I knew this is what I wanted to do. So right from high school, university, I always led the teams that were participating in drama and music festivals. So I found myself on leadership roles from that young age. And when I was finishing university, I look at my options. The options I had with my undergraduate was on theater and film. And I decided I want to pursue theater and specifically start the Kenya International Theatre Festival. And that's how I got myself into the actual arts management sector in Kenya. And then involvement with this festival, I've founded and found myself in active management roles, even within Kenya and also outside Kenya within the African continent with the various networks and programs that we run within the sector. So I found myself practicing because of the passion I have, because of the initiatives that I have started. And therefore, it's something that I've been learning on the job. And that's how I found myself into the management of arts in Kenya.
Great. Learning on the job. I'm going to pick that because I think that at times we have this imposter syndrome, right? It's like, I'm not fit to do this. I don't know it. Learning on the job. Haji, what about you? What's your journey? How did you start?
I always love to tell this story. Maybe before I didn't really enjoy talking about it. So I started with European languages while I was for my bachelor's degree. And I think I diverted because I've always volunteered to work with artists. But on the background, I'm not an artist, but I enjoyed, working with them, organizing, coordinating, scheduling, doing all of that. So I decided to go for my master's in human resources management, but I really wanted to focus on the creative industry. And of course, but I also really love human resources management. So I didn't want to drop that. I didn't want to study arts management because I enjoy working with people, mostly with artists, and I love how the synergy, coordinating the events and all of that. So I just thought I could still go for human resources management and see how to integrate that with, arts management with seeing how the creative industry works. So I decided to focus my master's thesis in human resources management in the creative industry, specifically working with artists. So I think most likely I started from there. The interest grew from there. And my first hands-on project as an arts manager was with my partner when he got a big project and he couldn't handle it as an artist, then as his own manager. So I took on the role, and from there, it's just continued like that. So that's how I got into art management.
Thank you. Thank you. That's interesting. So with your journeys are different, but ultimately landing in the same kind of area. So what do you think that cultural policies, what's the role that cultural policies play within the ecosystem that art managers need to be aware of? And I'm going to ask that question to Kevin.
I think I will answer.
Haji, yes. No, go ahead, Haji.
No, please go ahead.
It's okay. I think you're ready to answer. Let's go. Let's do it.
I thought that was for me, so I'm really sorry about that. Okay, yeah, I think I will just answer based on my experience. So when I started arts management, it was really, I would say, just like Taiwo said, you accidentally you find yourself in it sometimes, and you just take on the role and it goes. So I would say when I started, I wasn't very familiar with a lot of policies. I actually wasn't even aware that there were policies, guiding arts, so, but as I got deeper into it, I started Googling, I started making research online. And funny enough, I started in France. So it was really interesting because the landscape there is completely different from that of, let me say, Nigeria specific. And, when I switched over, when I moved back to Nigeria, it was like I was learning all over again, the African policies and culture, and entirely different from what I have, the knowledge I have backed while I was in France, which was more or less covering up the European landscape. So I had to relearn, I had to start all over again, more or less, getting into how it works, here in Africa or in Nigeria. So, but policies generally, I would say, from experience, they are there to more or less structure, to guide, how we operate as art managers, as art operators. Yeah.
So what do you think we need to be aware of before I go over to Kevin? So yeah, what would be, they're there to guide us. So what do you think we need to be aware of?
Well, based on my experience, when we started, for example, when we started getting into probably grant application, or we get into probably a call from UNESCO or UN, I found out that there are very specific, there are peculiar guidelines to different calls, for example. So, for example, they guide the kind of what to fund, what project to fund, what kind of, it also more or less helped me to know if our project gets into a particular policy. For example, there are policies that are guiding cultural heritage, and probably I have a project that is more on divided probably more into performance art, not necessarily have anything to do with cultural heritage. So it more or less guides, I would say, what it more or less give a direction of what projects what for what, what funding, for example, or what budget goes for what.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Kevin, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you very much. I think just to agree with Haji that policies are there to sort of regulate, determine ways in which a certain industry is regulated, protected, funded, also supported, and that's why I feel that cultural policies are very key, especially to arts management, and more specifically to Africa, because the nature in which Africa is governed, and I want to agree with Taiwo in his opening remarks that we cannot run away from politics, and therefore these policies are the only things that can help us put our leaders to account. These are the policies that can help us make sure that we are able to pinpoint that we deserve 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is protected here, and we can claim that right to access what belongs to us. But apart from putting our leaders and claiming what belongs to the sector, the policies also help us to know in which mechanism we operate, how we relate to within ourselves, outside ourselves, and also how we relate with our collaborators, how we relate with other industries. What are these mechanisms that are able to coordinate that cooperation, that allow for access, and therefore that's what I would say, that is why the policies exist and why they are very important to us to sort of demand what is ours, put what is there, and also try to give us direction as to how we can do certain things and how we cannot do certain things. And most importantly, the policies are there also to ensure that artists have that right for expression, especially in this continent and in an African context.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I love what both of you are speaking in terms of the culture, how policy and politics and politics really shape things. I wanna take a step back and come back to this idea of both of you being art managers, and we're gonna still come back to cultural policy again because we're gonna land there eventually. Especially with your work with Haji, you were talking about UNESCO and all these international players. We're gonna come there. But what the knowledge of art management that you've had, whether it's by practice or whether it's by whatever shape or form, how is that helping you in what you're doing right now? Kevin, you founded so many things, from the Kenya International Theatre Festival to the Trust to the Kenya Theatre Award to the Creative Art Leadership Institute. Haji, same thing, the school, the QDance Center, the QDance School. How does the knowledge of art management, how has that helped you in creating and founding and establishing those things? And what are those knowledge that you want to share with us that you think are really critical for art managers in this 21st post-COVID century need to know, that can help them as they think about their own process? I know, Kevin, you're muted already. Maybe we'll start with you. We go to Haji, if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for that interesting and very good question. I think for me, what management of the arts has really enabled me is to see that side of the business of the arts, not just see art for the art's sake, but see the business of the arts. And you see, that's what management is about: managing the opportunities, managing the people, managing the resources, and then looking at the art as a business and what role, number one, the role of art in the society, to ensure that, yes, we give access to artists, we give a platform, we have an institution that is running, that is sustainable, but then how do you also handle this opportunity as a business? How does it create an opportunity and revenue, salaries for people? How then do you then also sustain an institution that you start, especially a festival? And coming from a history that most African initiatives from where I sit in a Kenyan context, no festival has gone beyond 10 years in Kenya. So that has also been a very interesting thing to also learn. Why is it that there is a founder syndrome, and why do many initiatives die with the founders? So also that element of being able to understand this is a business. How can you build a sustainable business that supersedes you as a person, and then be able to leave it to have its own life, That I think that is the critical component of what I've learned as an art manager and how I've approached initiatives that I'm doing, activities that I'm initiating, ensuring that the management of the arts is beyond an individual. It's building institutions that can run for a long time, is building initiatives that are able to create an impact and be meaningful, not just to me as a person or to me as an artist, but to the larger community, basically enabling art to play its role in the society, but also in knowing that we're running a business. Art management is a business. Art is a business that needs sustainability, that needs to be looked beyond a platform, beyond an event.
Haj, I'm going to come to you. I think, Kevin, you've raised another interesting thing here. So what would you, there's a school of thought where when you bring the idea of business into art, some people frown at it because they feel that you are usurping the capitalist system to say, yeah, this is business and all that. What's your counter response to that?
I think very, very, very tricky. And it's true, there's that element of bringing capitalism into it, and especially from a perspective of an African, because you see, art used to be an intrinsic thing in our communities, you know, every day-to-day life. When we finish harvest, we have to gather, we have to perform, we eat, we rejoice when it's a wedding. It's intrinsic. But you have to know, and it has to be noted, that for that intrinsic activity to happen, it has to be planned. There has to be somebody who knows how this event will be, how long it will run. There has always been a manager in arts. It has always been an activity that has been managed, only that we've not looked at it from a business point of view, you get? And I will say even then, trying to look at art even in the African context, artists used to perform. They never used to do any other work, but they used to be paid, you know. It has always been a business because they'll go perform in a certain village, and because they are artists, they don't have time to go and farm. Those villagers will give them some food. That's a form of payment, you know. That's a form of business. That's trade. And to me, that is the most important thing that people need to realize. It is not, yes, it is art. We're doing it for entertainment. It's part of us as a community, but there is a business side to it. However, we may want to look at it, whether it is capitalism or not capitalism, it is a business, it is a trade, it has a trade, it has an appreciation form, there is a performance, there is an audience, and there is a return. Even in our African community, I want to challenge those people who say, let them say, how did artists used to survive even during pre-colonial? Because they used to be paid, they used to earn from their art.
Thanks, Kevin. Haji, so like I have 3 questions for you back to back. Please pick it whatever direction you want to go. Let me leave it at that. I don't want to editorialize my question again, but just wanted to respond to that. And yeah,
this is really interesting for me because I'm not an artist. So it's interesting because I would say where Kevin is coming from, I'm coming from the other side, which means now I've learned to listen to my artists, to have conversations with them about their projects, and to find a way to bring my knowledge, then their knowledge together to make the project work both ways. So I would say for me, I've always been in line to sustain the organization or the system or the structure that we have created, meaning my artists will never perform without getting paid anywhere, never. It has never happened and it will never happen. I always have financial conversations with my artists, meaning we have conversation on how much would you like to be paid? I have created a budget. This is what we have on ground. This is what we can make of it. Of course, there are times of conflict where the idea is like, this is the way we want it to be. And I come in and say, but this is the way we have to have it to be, because your idea is bigger than what we have in terms of financial resources. So my own conversation is coming from the other way. For me, it's always how to manage this thing, to sustain it, and to keep it that way. So here in Nigeria, for example, we've had moments where we have conversations with with partners, and we hear, oh, you know, QDance artists are very expensive, so maybe this is why and we're like, oh, have we had the conversation? Let's have this conversation first, and let's see where we'll move from there. Because, of course, there is a mentality of, I think you can work for free, or you can perform for free, or because of the relationship. The relationship is absolutely important, but at the same time, artists cannot work for free. I mean, what they are doing is also, it's something that requires a process, a procedure that they've gone through in bringing something out that you enjoy to watch, or that you enjoy to listen to, or that you enjoy to participate in. So absolutely, you have to pay for that, just like you pay for your food in a restaurant, or you pay for transportation or something, or electricity. So of course, for me, it's a conversation that is, there is no argument about it for me. It's that way. You know, how do we sustain this? So what I have learned in my case is how to listen to my artist and how to have this conversation with them to understand their own point of view or their creative process, put myself in it, and find a way to balance, you know, both ways.
So both of you, you've raised, we're still on this, and after that, I'll pass it to Natasha. Both of you, you've raised two interesting concepts, ideas on you know, that many times has led to the peril of the art. Haji, one of the misconceptions you've raised, or the idea that many people have of the art, is that we should do it for free. And Kevin, you've raised this idea that, which is true, that's what many people think, is that, well, the moment you start talking about business, money making, and all of that, it's like, oh, you're touchy, it's very touchy. How do we change these conceptions, these misconceptions, these ideas? How do we change that? You know, because both of them are really, they are living and active in our day-to-day. That's the reason why somebody will ask you to bring your troupe or to do a project, and they expect you to do it for free, or to do it semi-free, or to just, you know, they say, just, yeah, come and shake your body, and you're good to go, right? Without giving money. It's not just to dance, just come and dance and go. But so that's that mindset on one side. But there's the other side. When you start talking about money, then they said, yeah, are you not an artist? Well, and then we want to introduce money into the conversation. Then all of a sudden, it becomes, it's like a tension. How do we address this? What are the things that you are doing in your own work to address those things? We'll start with Haji.
Yeah, for me, thank you. Thank you very much. For me, there are a few ways that I think we've been able to address this. Of course, I would say it's an ongoing battle, because it's not ended yet, but there are a few ways that we've addressed. So the first is, there is a program we do monthly that we call Resource. Is one of Resource is strictly for arts managers and art administrators, for those that are interested in becoming. So what I do is I facilitate session that can go for like sometimes 2 or 3 months, sometimes a month, depending on the schedule. And so those that are really interested in becoming art managers, we go through classes, series of classes, homeworks, and we have conversations about, you know, ways to do this and ways not to do that. That's one thing, meaning I'm more or less educating, or we're more or less educating those that have no idea on how to go, but they have artists they work with, but it's just freestyling. So they can put a structure more or less to it. That's one way. The second thing is, my artists, we always have conversations about when it gets to financial conversation, they pass it on to the manager. They talk artistic, they talk creative, but every time it gets to that point where we have to discuss money, that's when I get an email, I get a call, and it's like automatic. So, and we always have conversations about never sign a contract when you're not clear about it, when you're not sure about it. Do not get yourself into a situation that will be difficult for me to defend you or to get you out of it. So I would say, of course, artists are also they also need to have this education, even if they are not the managers. They pre-manage before we get to the point where you pass it to someone that will handle it. So that's another way. Then for me, the third way, which is something we practice, is they will get used to it. Yes, there might be a few opportunities, then they are not opportunities anymore anyway, that they will say, I really want you to do this, but I don't have the money, or I don't know. But then you see them spending on other stuff that you feel, okay, that means there is no value that is attached to what we do. Why would I want to strip the value off my artist and say, for this sake or that sake, let them do it, we have never done anything for free. There might be situations where we do not have financial compensation, but because of the kind of setting or the structure of the events, we might do it because there is probably 1 or 2 or 3 individuals that will cover up for the expenses afterward in another project.
Thanks, Haji. Kevin, how do you
Yes.
how do you bring these two ideas, these two misconception? How do
Yeah.
you grapple with them?
I think I want to say when there is a request for service and then there is demand for payment, there's always that tension. And to me as an art manager, I'll always look at what is the value. And this value necessarily, and I want to come from a point where I want to understand Haji, because I've engaged artists. I've been in a situation where I need artists and I have to negotiate with them. I may not have the money they are requesting, but we have to come to the table and agree what value, and it's just any other service. What value are we offering? What value are we offering each other? And I think from a context of where we come from, where resources are very limited, and also from a point of where the artists will see, if say you're planning an event, say at the National Theatre, you have paid for the National Theatre, you have paid for food, and I think this, as a manager, I face this challenge because also I may have gone to the table and negotiated with somebody else and they have seen a value. So I think for me is for the artist, number one, or the artist manager in this case, like for Haji or for me, is to see what value. And especially from an African context, value, and don't get me wrong, value has never always been money. You get, there are other forms of money is really important. We have to survive, we have to pay our bills, we have, we have to get somewhere, we have to do this. But there is what value can, and I think the most important way to break that tension is the question of value. And this value can be both monetary and non-monetary. And I think that is what we really need to look at, from that will break that tension. That's the strategy I've always used to break the tension. What value am I giving you? What opportunities am I giving you? And the value in this case, there is a lot of misconception where we say, I'm giving you a platform. You never know who is in the audience. There's always this question. You never know who is watching. What value apart from the platform can you get from as an artist? And you can negotiate. I'm inviting you to perform here, but I may not have the full amount to pay you 100%. I can pay you 75% in cash, and then I can compensate the 25 in another value. It could be a training, it could be something, it could be an opportunity. That is the trade that needs to happen, so that as an artist or as a manager, I feel I've gotten 100% of the service I needed. And also for the performing artist to also feel they have gotten 100% of the value that is their worth. And that is the most important bit. And I think, to me, that is how I try to normally break that tension.
So I'll pass it on to Natasha now. I'll say some things quickly. The idea of value proposition, the idea of require for service, demands for payment. I want both of you to start thinking about this. Hopefully we'll come back to it. I'll just throw it there anyway. The misconception is with multiple stakeholders. So we have the artists we need to fight. We need to we need them to rethink the idea of them thinking about the service that they are giving and what's the value proposition and what's the exchange of that value. Okay, that's with the artist. That's sort of like our, they're in our corner. But we also have the non-artist, other stakeholders like organizations, governments, and individuals who are also of the opinion that artists should not be paid or just give them anything and you'll be fine. And I always say, okay, if you, for example, as an organization, you go call an auditor to come and audit your account, you don't tell them that, oh, just audit the account for free and you'll be fine. The auditor is offering a service to get your account straightened. They've gone through years of training and all of that. The artist is offering you a certain service that is taking them X number of hours or years or decades to polish and to do. And at times, they're always in the making. So why is it that you have to tell us that as artists that our service should be whatever for free or just give us anything? Why not treat us as Deloitte? Why not treat us as KPMG? Why not treat us as, you can't go and buy a bottle of Coca-Cola and then collect it and say, don't worry, it's for free. So we need the mindset. It's on two levels now: the artist and the other stakeholders who are non-artists. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for you the both of you, hopefully we'll come back to this. What do you think the role of policy can be in changing this mindset? Because perhaps if there are policies, labor policies, Haji, I know your expertise in human resource, are there policies that we need to start thinking about that, that have been legislated that we need to adopt that can help us to say, well, if you, based on this legal framework, based on these policies, this legislation, you can't hire an artist or my artist that I'm managing without paying them X number of Naira per hour or X number of dollar or whatever currency we're using. Just again, maybe you want to speak to that. And Kevin, same thing. Like, are there ways that policy can help us? Because yes, I know, Haji, you talked about education and all of that and providing resources and training and all that. But are there other high level things such as policies and things like that that could help us really change this systemic? It's cultural, it's systemic, it's sort of everything, so that it can help us think about that. I'm just kind of throwing that to you, both of you, to think about it, and hopefully we'll come back. And if we don't, it's also fine. I want the conversation to go to the direction we wanted to go to, but I want to pass it on to Natasha. So over to you, Natasha.
Yeah, I want to hear the answers to the questions you've just asked, but also, so then within the challenges of, potentially like looking at policies that could help shift this mindset and put things in place so that people are educated, the different stakeholders, and this is it, this is how we're going to move forward. What other challenges exist in terms of arts management, the cycle from a policy perspective? Like, what other challenges come up when we're looking at, the arts management cycle when it comes to policy? Are there any other challenges, or is this like the main thing? And I'm going to pass this to Haji and then over to Kevin. Yeah, so what are those other challenges?
I think in our own situation, for example, in Nigeria, I would say outdated policies. That's one of the challenges that we're facing. There are policies that have been in the system for the past how many years now, and they have been changing governance, and there have been a lot. Not that I found out recently that there are policies that have been currently being reviewed. There are that have been created for the creative industry here in Nigeria, but they have not been implemented yet. And these are really amazing. These are interesting policies that would really help a lot the creative industry. But the ones that are currently in existence are the ones that are more or less outdated and are not useful for us. So this, I would say, is number one, I think is one of the greatest challenge that we are facing right now. Not that the work had not been done by experts, to rewrite, to propose new forms, reintroduce according to what is happening right now, what could really be beneficial to us realistically now in 2025, but not been implemented yet. So that's one major challenge I think I can pin on facing.
Thank you so much, Haji.
Thank you. Yes, and I want to take this from Taiwo's question and then tie it to your question. And I think the biggest challenge we face, and I want to connect all the 54 countries and call it as a continent, appreciating that we're not one country, but we are one continent. But we have a systemic problem. Because of art being intrinsic, because of it being day-to-day activity, because of it being part of the community, and because we've not seen any artist go to school, then we tend to belittle the artist. Because we live with them, we go to school with them, they are part of the society, then why should we pay you? This is something you are born with, It's like maybe a son asking his father to pay him. Why should I pay you? Yet you're my son, And I think that is the systematic problem that we face in terms of value and valuing the art, because just like what they say that a preacher is never accepted in his own community because, what are you saying? We've grown with you. You see, I think that's the biggest challenge we face as a continent with the arts, because we've not seen this famous person go anywhere. They have practiced their art, their honed their skill within us, part of us, like we see them every day. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and it requires a policy shift. It requires a total policy shift, so that then and what I've been trying to do in my work is even if there is a poet who does poetry, is it possible for them to undertake a professional course, and that course is accompanied by a graduation, and a certificate, so that the community sees this person has gone to school and has been ratified as a poet, and therefore their career is poetry. Same case with actors, same case with all art forms, and that can only come in terms of policy. And I'm very happy, like in Kenya, there is recognition of prior learning, people who have learned now in the art, who've been practicing, can register, go to an institution, especially like us, we can come and be certified as a poet. And I think that shift in itself will help address that challenge, because people will now see this is an accountant who have called in to audit. They have gone to school. They have, they paid school fees. Their parent invested, because that form of investment is not seen with the artist, then we tend to lack value for that artist. And therefore they'll say, come just perform. We're giving you a platform to showcase your talent, because they think without them giving you that platform, you can't excel. That's challenge number one. And then now, also, in terms to address Natasha's question, is what challenges are we facing within the art management cycle and policy perspective? Number one is that people in politics, people in leadership roles do not understand the arts. And I'll say this without any fear of doubt. They do not value or understand the role of art in the community. And I think that is the biggest challenge. They don't see the role, the place, and the impact of this art. They do not look at it from an economic point of view, like we do with agriculture. In Kenya, I think agriculture gets anywhere between 30% of the budget, and it's because there have been studies to show that when we take maize, we plant it, we invest this with fertilizer, and these are the number of bags we produce. These are the number of bags we sell. This is the cost, and therefore this is the economic benefit of agriculture. And that's, to me, why art management is really important, because this is the biggest gap, because we've not proven the value of art through research. There is no study. Show me one study that shows theater in Kenya is making X amount of money, it's employing X number of people, it is contributing X amount of GDP to this country. That's the challenge. Look at the sectors that have excelled in Africa. I'll take, for example, film in Nigeria. They have proper studies that show what is the economic benefit of the film industry in Nigeria, and what is it bring it back to the GDP. And therefore, government and parliament will listen, because there is proper research, there is proper data to back the value of art in the continent. And I think that is, there should be policies to encourage research. And that's why, for me, I'm very keen. And that's why we've started the Creative Leadership Arts Institute in Kenya to precisely do that. Look at how many people are employed in the creative sector in the entire country, mapping out such statistics, telling out of a population of 50 million, close to 40 or 50% of the population is purely dependent on the creative economy. Because if you look at the amount of money that is given to agriculture, if that amount were to be invested in creative economy in any country in the African continent, the ripple effect will be huge. Number one, we have good weather, we have good destinations. If you were to invest in the creative economy, and 70% of the population is below the age of 35, you can imagine the amount of work that will produce, the amount of destinations that people will come to our continent to see, and you imagine if you were to mix creative arts and cultural tourism with the safaris we have in Kenya, it will be very magnificent. People will die to come, and it's throughout. It's not like summer in Europe, it's throughout the year. You can visit any time of the year. That's the beauty about it. But that has to be influenced by culture, having people who understand, challenging artists to get into the management of the arts, because we complain that people who are in management do not understand, but we are not going for those positions. As we said, you cannot separate the art and politics. For any development of any industry, it has to have the political goodwill. And therefore, we cannot separate politics and the arts. And that is why artists need to go to the arts, so that those positions can be filled with people who understand the art. And that's very important. That's also why I encourage artists to go to school, study, so that when you go to the table, you have the confidence and you have the right statistics to do that. And therefore, and then, of course, it is very important to bring these people to benchmark and see the amount of money that is being invested in the arts elsewhere outside Africa, so that then the benefits that those people are reaping from those investments. Thank you.
This is really, sorry, Natasha, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you. I'm kind of like also now circling back to what Haji had said, just in terms of listening, that the act of listening to what artists need, listening to what value and being open to seeing and documenting the value that arts can provide a people. Is really important. So it's not just artists, creative people, it's also those people who are great at listening. It's just something that really stands out to me. So thank you for answering those questions. Taiwo, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Just so last week in the third episode, part of the things we talked about is research, and you're bringing that to the fore again. And I'm hearing what both of you are really talking about around investment. It sounds, and again, it was reiterated in the last episode where, other sectors are being supported and invested in by the government. But when it comes to art, it's the first thing to cut. The funding cut comes first is the art. Even if we get to universities, a lot of the time when there is budgetary issues, the first program to cut, they are the art programs, humanities. You cut it out. You leave the sciences, you leave the business, you leave all of that. And that's because we've not yet come to that idea. There's still that mindset that is again sponsoring all of that. You've mentioned research, data-driven decision making, that art is contributing to the creative economy. Education, which again, both of you are doing that already, and policies, that people that really understand politics and governance, creating those policies and implementing them. Not just people that do not know how art work and they just create one policy and all of that. I want to come back to the piece around policy. Are there any policies on the continent, maybe with, maybe even if it borrowed from like European Union, ECOWAS, the high level and the countries and all of that, that we think might be of help in terms of within our operations within the arts? And I'm asking that because when we also talk about the art and the artist, it's also in degrees, right? The artists that are the Afro music artists, they go everywhere in the world. Like if any of these corporations want to do anything, they call them this, give them money. That's their idea of. So again, it's also in degrees, right? So maybe we also want to clarify when we're talking about artists, we also don't want to generalize it. I'll give an example. If MTN, because MTN is in Kenya, is in Nigeria. MTN is in Kenya, right? Yes.
Mm.
If MTN wants to do like a slam, right, across the, they can invite, one of our famous artists like Burna Boy. No doubt about it, they're gonna give that money, right? That's an artist that has a manager. That's one reality. So the fact that our corporations are investing in that kind of, artistic expression doesn't mean that they're investing in all that, all. So it's kind of complex, but it's good to kind of delineate it. So are there policies, for example, I know many years ago, I did a study on mobility on the continent and all of that, like visa regimes. Are there policies that can help us in terms of mobility for artists? Are there policies around funding? Are there policies around labor relations that we can, again, and you don't have to, we don't, if we don't have them, it's okay. Well, maybe it's not okay. Maybe we're getting to that point where it's like, no, it's not okay not to have, and we're not saying be regulated extremely, but that somebody is putting 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 week of work, 6 months of work, and then they get nothing other than a platform to showcase their, to give them opportunity, like Kevin was saying. So are there adjacent sector or places that we think we need to start drawing from? Because the reality is that within our sector right now, we don't necessarily have enough research, enough frameworks and policies that can help us. But maybe there are other places that these things have been done that we don't have to reinvent the wheel and we can then adapt. It's not a question, it's a prompt. So I welcome any of you to jump in at this point and offer your thoughts.
Maybe I can start and say that, for example, I think policies are there, and I'll speak from a context right from Kenya. We have a cultural and heritage policy that stipulates, and there is a statement that says the national government will establish national facilities. The county government will, support, because we have two levels of government. We have the national and the county government. That says there's these policy statements that are very, very articulate, very clear. The policies are there. Like for us, the policies there is, it may not be a specific to what the numbers they will do, because there's a commitment for government. And I feel that's normally the best policy, where there's commitment and the government then goes ahead and does, but implementation is the problem. In my research and in my undertaking of my PhD, I also came to realize that there is an African Union Charter for African Cultural Renaissance.
That's true,
that
yeah.
was passed in 2006, but only came to effect in 2019, close to 13 years later, because countries had never signed or ratified it, So it shows you, even within the heads of state, it takes them 13 years to accept something that a head of state has sat in a summit and passed, So you can now imagine how long it will take for the countries now to implement. See, if to ratify it takes 13 years, how long will it then take to implement? What are the challenges of funding? There's clear commitment that there should be exchange within the continent. There should be facilitate that. But trust you me, for me to go to Ghana, I'll have to fly to Europe for me to get to Ghana, Those are the sad realities that we face. Getting those visas, to even go within African continent is a challenge. It is very expensive to fly to Ghana than to fly to England, And why is it so? You see, is it a systematic problem that has been created? Like, since I started practicing, I think since I fasted, I started moving outside of the country. That was like in 2013. We had our very first meeting as African leaders in Africa last year. We used to meet as Africans in Europe, in the US, but within the continent, it has been very hard. Number one, because of resources, there are very many barriers to meet within the continent, But again, not to say that there are no policies. Policies are there. The issue is, do we have the right people in government? Do we have the statistics? Can we prove that this is a product that has value, that can be funded, that can have lots of impact if we were to facilitate that? So those are the biggest challenges. And I feel also the other challenges are within the governance system of the African continent. The role of the artist is seen during the campaign, but suppressed when there is an issue, because then it is seen as a threat to the leadership. And that's why a lot of leaders and a lot of countries don't want to give that 100% right, because then the artist is seen as a very big threat to rulers, to leaders. And that is the case, because then the nature of art is that we are very expressive, and a lot of leaders fear that. And I feel that is part of the reasons why we are where we are as specifically maybe for Kenya as a continent. Yes, I don't know for other, but it could be the situation. It is an assumption that I'm making.
Thanks, Kevin. Haji, and I'll ask another question, but let's go to Haji first.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All these conversations just bring me down memory lane while living in France, working with artists. And, this is not a case of comparison, absolutely not. And I cannot actually 100% say that the system there is perfect. There are also loopholes where artists complain so much about meeting the hours targets, being able to reintegrate back into the, social security system so that they can get back money for the hours that they've worked or for the ones that they've not worked. So there are definitely loopholes there where artists themselves complain. However, I cannot ignore the fact that it's also well planned out, that since there are policies in place that support or help artists in the situations where probably they are not working at the moment due to whatever reasons, at least there's something to fall back on where they can sustain themselves pending the time they go back to work, And one of the things that we're facing here in Africa, or I would say in Nigeria specifically, is very limited or poorly structured art council, for example, cultural funds, or national endowments. You know, sometimes I'll hear this and I'm like, oh, I never heard about this fund. Is this still existing? And they're like, oh, no, it's not really, you know, it's a policy in making. Oh, it's there, but it's not active. You know, there is this lack of clear governance structure for arts institutions. There is no particular structure that has been put in place. We have arts institutions here. We have, you know, our National Arts Council and all of that, but they are just there. There is no clear governance, you know, structure for these institutions that are supposed to help, you know, arts managers like us. So we more or less become vulnerable to administrative inefficiencies, because we don't know whether to go to this side or to go to that side. We don't, so we begin to work like in circle, because we begin to freestyle, do things that work for us, work for our institution, or work for the artist, since there is no clear governance or no clear policy put in place that is guiding us, you know, in a particular way to do things. There's also a problem of public private partnerships. We are not really sure, you know, what works and what doesn't. So eventually, even when there are private institutions that are supporting the arts, they are supporting based on their own internal policy, I would say, but not the one that have been laid down by the government, that where there are limitations or there are restrictions on what you can or cannot do for arts institutions or for artists or for creatives in general. So these are part of, these are, of course, bigger issues that affect us as art managers. You know, there is the issue of mobility, you know, visa issues, like Kevin said, for goodness sake, to travel from Kenya to Ghana, why do you have to go all around the world, you know? So this, I would say, of course, this now comes down to the continental issue, where policies need to be jointly made to facilitate, to make easier movement, for example, within, you know, the African continent, for co-productions to happen, you know, for tour to be easy. I know there are tours that we've organized in Togo, for example, in Ghana, that we've had to go through really, really tough situations, because this is not a system that exists already. So when you're asking for this or you're asking for that, which are normal, but they begin to sound abnormal, because these are not things that naturally happens. And you as an arts manager feel that you have a work that you'd like to tour within the continent. We can go outside, we can go to the Americas, we can go to Europe, you know, we can tour all over the world, but it's also important to begin to look inward and see how, you know, as much as people are loving our work in Nigeria, we'd like to spread it all across Africa. But the mobility is a big problem, moving these things around. And, you know, so there is need absolutely for a collective, of course, policy to facilitate some certain things for art workers generally on the continent.
This is great, because you've mentioned art councils. My next question was going to be on art councils, and I'm going to come to that. Because when we're talking about players, and Kevin, you were mentioning in Kenya, you have two tiers. You have the federal and then the state, or the state government. And I think you have you have art council too in Kenya, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly. No? Okay. So is Kenya not part of IFACA, International Federation of Arts and Culture and Art Councils? Maybe not. Okay. So in Nigeria, for example, we have the National Art Councils, and then the National Art Councils, which by the cultural policy, right, by the legislation that we have the National Art Council, and then we have the state art councils. All right. Now, the state art councils, they do festival in a year or something. There's a programming they do. I think they do NAFest and different things like that and all of that. Now, what you find in many of these countries, and I've studied these art councils and many of these cultural policies, is that what these players, they are meant to be players within the ecosystem. What is happening is that they are not necessarily supporting the artists that are outside their employment. So as a national art council, you have your artists, or the state councils, you have your artists, right? And then you employ them. And then the ones that you employ, basically you give them salary, they go to NAFest, they go to every other festival. But you see, any artist outside that employment, it doesn't concern the art council. So instead of the art council to build a system that can support the ecosystem, not necessarily supporting the artist that is an employee, but supporting the ecosystem from whatever level, whether it's policy, whether it's all of these things, it basically becomes art councils that employ labor, and then they collect the revenue that is given to them by the state to pay those people, and that's it. And if we do a statistics of artists that make it, whether dancer, whether drama actor, whether musician, that make it into the national troupe or into the state troupe, it's not up to 1% of the artists you have in your state. So again, how do we need to start moving these needles? Because it's policy driven, and like we've all established, these policies, the reality is that if you took the African Union for everybody to get onto that soft law, which is not a hard law, by the way, it's a soft law, which means that it's not legally binding on the state. It's not, it's a soft law. It took them 13 years to get through that process, that pipeline. And then many of our countries, the policies that we have, it's either they are outdated or they are not implemented and all of that. What do we as a sector, what do we need to start doing? Because honestly, we can't wait. So can we start thinking, what might we need to start thinking on our own level? Perhaps maybe creating an alliance, creating network coalitions. Like, what do we need to start doing to start moving the eye of the needle that hopefully can have that trickle effect? Okay. Sorry, I'm just putting in some research in there because it's something that I've worked on over and over. Anyway, I'll put that back to both of you, and just to hear your thoughts on that. And you don't, like I say, you don't need to have any answer. Just want to say, you don't need to, I'm not trying to put you in a hot seat here. It's a conversation. Just we're thinking through some of these things that hopefully someone will hear it, we see it, and it will strike some chord. Anyway, back to you, Haji, and then to Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taiwo. I really love that question because it strikes so many chords. So firstly, I mean, popular opinion, I might be wrong. This more or less brings me back to one of the challenges. I'll answer the questions was of policies. And I think it's sustainability and innovation, So sustainability, because there are policies, of course, that have been made that are not considering a lot of things like digital innovation. For example, if you look at this art scene in Nigeria, there are more and more younger people. We work a lot with young people, and there are more and more young people. And when you talk about National Art Council or the State Council, they are never interested. In fact, they don't even know what it is, and they're not really interested in joining or in whatever it is. Because for them, it sounds like you're taking me backwards. You're taking me back to I don't know, before I was born. They have no idea. And I also feel like in these councils, they have not been updated, policies to really integrate these younger ones, into that system. Not necessarily employing them, but just to be aware generally that this exists and these are the things that we put in place and this and what we're doing. And you also most likely find that most of the workers of these councils also are not much aware of what is happening in the younger part of the ecosystem. What they are into and what they are doing and what they're, what innovation or what projects they're getting into. So because of this lack of or these two words that are facing backwards each other. It seems like now in Nigeria, there's more and more collaboration, within the younger ecosystem, because they see that there's a gap that needs to be filled. And if this is not in place, we can as well introduce, it ourselves and practice it, and bring it to their faces and let them see it. And I would say that fair enough, I think they are hearing the echo, they're saying it, because it's like constantly there. They are really present. All these young people that we work with, we can see it. We see how much they push. We also have a collective. So what we do, for example, at the Q School is we have an alumni, because network is really important. Even also learning from, the problem that we are facing constantly. So once there's a graduating team or graduating students, automatically they get into the alumni, and they get into whatever project that is ongoing, they get into whatever activities that is ongoing. There's a lot of collaboration as well happening. So just to keep the network going. So whether our alumni are directly involved in our own project, for example, the QDance Center, or they're involved in other alumni projects or their own projects, it's still an ecosystem that is breathing. And this is so for a lot of collectives that are coming up, in Lagos, for example, or in Nigeria as a whole, that are coming together. So if there is no system or there is no policy in place, the creative industry is coming together to, to breathe up their own. And like it or not, the government are beginning to notice, they are beginning to see it, that, something is happening out there. And hopefully it gets an attention that is enough to bring in a policy that will work for all.
Thanks, Haji. Kevin, national stakeholders, players like art councils, over to you.
Yes. I think these are institutions that play a key role, and you look at any country that is excelling in the arts generally around the world, their national art councils are very robust, very well funded. They implement their roles, and from a national perspective, undertaking this research, we are saying, what is the economic impact of the arts, what is the benefit, or what is the ripple effect? What can we do? Distributing money nationwide, grants, running opportunities, funding opportunities, connecting people, exporting their arts to the world. They are doing that so well that we only need, the best thing we can do is just to study what they are doing and do that. But for us to get there, we have to self-organize, because I think, like for Kenya, I see the thing we need to do is to self-organize, ensure that we as artists have self-organized, have engaged the government, and agree to take up leadership roles. And I think that is the key. And once we get into key leadership roles, I think the other challenge I've seen with artists is that once you get there, we try to gatekeep. I think there's this tendency where a few people feel that have struggled so much to get here. There's a sense of gatekeeping, which is a very big challenge. And I think with the Gen Zs, they have been very bold, to say that this is our space. We need to occupy our space, because quite the older generation, one, didn't mentor the young people, and therefore they have been there for ages, and they have sort of kept everything for themselves, which is the biggest challenge. And I'll imagine that's why there will be a National Arts Council, but all it does, it plays the role of a troupe, a national troupe, and not necessarily a National Arts Council. In Kenya, we don't have that. I think there have been several attempts to establish art councils, but they have not seen light of day. But I think what I'm also trying to pose to us is to think, why has film excelled in Africa? Because I tend to believe that in almost every country in Africa, there is a film commission. There are structures for funding film. And that, I think that is, we need to pause, because that is one art form that has really excelled in the continent. And for example, the case of Kenya, we have a Kenya Film Commission, we have a Kenya Film Classification Board, you know. We have two bodies that are specifically looking at the affairs of filmmakers in the country. You know, they have proper structures. And I want to imagine this is almost the case in each and every African country, most of it, because there is something, and I don't know what is the role of I was just asking myself, what is the role of the private sector? What role has the private sector played to ensure that is the case? You know, what has other art councils like Alliance, you know, the Goethe Institutes, what role have they played in establishment of this film commission and advocating for government to establish, you know, such agencies? And I think there is something that we really need to learn and look at from a point of art management, because that is an area that has excelled. And unlike Kenya, we have the Kenya Cultural Center, which was established in 1952, pre-colonial, which still exists with the same law. There have been several attempts to change the law, but again, that will also have its own challenges, including funding. You get? So I think those are sort of provocations I want to throw out there. What has made film excel in the continent? Because I think if there is an art form that we really need to study is film, because it is doing so well and they have government structures within film. It may have its own challenges, but I think it is one thing that we can study. And I think mostly we need to self-organize, we need to be very bold, and we need to engage as Africans to look for African solution, because in most cases, we've tended to go outside Africa to look for solutions. I think it's time we really looked at internally and see what are the solutions. That's why I'm putting a provocation, because film has worked in almost every country in Africa. So what is it that has excelled in film that cannot be replicated in other art forms, you know? And what is it that, and I think that is a provocation that also myself will take up really, to look at what is this thing that has made film excel.
Thank you, Kevin. And the question of what has made film excel, I think it's an interesting question. A lot of the research that a lot of the existing research shows that there's a lot of private investment in film due to its marketability. So Nollywood, which, you know, arguably, I don't think it's even arguably, it's on the continent of Africa is the most is the most revenue generating woods on the entire continent. It wasn't the government. It's the private investors, the Alaba markets, okay? My Igbo brothers and Igbo sisters. Let's just be honest. Let's be real. Like there's a lot of, and they self-organized. They put so many things in. Now, at the very beginning, we had I can't speak for other countries, but for Nigeria, of course, we know that with NTA, the Nigerian Television Authority, and it involved at the very beginning. But this particular people group, they self-organized. They saw opportunities there, and they invested in that. So of course, that if you go to Lagos today, there's the Alaba market. Haji, I hope I'm correct with that information. I think it's called Alaba market. Like there is, and you realize that they've created a system and a structure. Now, of course, we have the policies that kind of follow that in terms of censorship and classification and all of those things. But those things won't be possible if individuals and the privates didn't see that opportunity to self-organize. So I think that perhaps it's the same thing we need to think about for the arts broadly. it's the same thing for music, like particularly our Afro music, which is again on top of the chart in the world right now, with our, our amazing artists from Nigeria, and many of them, which we know. I was in Stockholm 2 years ago, and I saw the poster of Burna Boy in Stockholm in Sweden. I'm like, my goodness, my people are here. Like that particular genre was made popular, by Fela Anikulapo and even many ancestors before him. All right. And then they've blown that, and now it's now in the mainstream, it's been commercialized, and many corporations can bet on it. They can put on it, and then these artists, they spend so many years to fine-tune, to blow, or to fine-tune their art and all of that. So I think that your question around the private-public partnership is really very critical, in my opinion. The second thing is moving on to international players. I know we've kind of talked about national players. I do agree we need to there's so many things that we need to work in there. In my opinion, it's not as if it counts, but in my opinion, I don't think art councils, should be. I think a model that they should be using that is worth exploring is that model where they are meant to be. Art councils and national councils are meant to be places to midwife opportunities and give it to artists, rather than employing artists to just go and do one festival and then employment them for the rest of the year, and then you don't have resources to invest in the sector. Like it can't work that way. When you are not generating any money. Let's just be honest. Like many of the art councils that we have, in a different part of the country, different part of the continent, in these countries, they are not generating any funding. They are dependent on funding from the government, and then when they collect that funding from the government, maybe like 90% of it goes to paying salaries. There is no way, and then you have the overhead costs, you have all of those things. So by the time you're done at the end of the year, you really don't have any money to actually invest in the ecosystem itself. One. Number two, when opportunities come, because they're also bottlenecked, those opportunities are gatekept. They gatekeep them so that, like Haji was saying, that, there are many applications that will come out that they are late already. Art Council is sitting on it because they want to be the one to submit something, and then it's late, or they submit some again. I'm not in that system. I don't know how, but information don't get to the people that really need it on time. And so it's a day before that information closes, the funding closes. And it's because the funding is so the National Arts Council of Namibia, for example, want to do something. Of course, because they have an ecosystem, they have an alliance, they reach out to the National Council of Nigeria, and this is just purely just theory here. They reach out to the National Arts Council of Nigeria to do something. So there's an opportunity going that way, but because there is no way that thing can reach out to the ecosystem itself broadly, it then goes to from National Arts Council. When the information, if the people up there, maybe they don't need it, or they've taken the quota they want, then they trickle down to the state. And then the state will take its own quota. Like, for how long are we going to do this? That's the question. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. I know all of them saying it's a lot of provocation, and I know anybody, folks that are listening to this later, I'm really pushing some borders here, but it's the truth. If we want the private to come in, we want private and public partnership, then there has to be some existing processes and protocols and policies, because the private is not going to come in if it's not going to give them value. We talked about value proposition from the beginning. I'm not going to invest X number of dollar or naira in a project that I know that is not giving me visibility, is not giving me anything. The reason why MTN, my example earlier on, without anything,
would choose to spend X number of dollars on Burna Boy. Again, that's my example earlier on, and I'm not saying they're paying him or anything, just an example, please. The reason is because they know that the gravatar, the audience, the follower, that everything that he gives to them will benefit their business. It's always about value proposition. And so if the art sector is not well organized, there is no policy that is helping anybody, no programming, no initiative, nothing, all those things are just kind of very small, and we're all fighting for it, the crab mentality, then which private investor will invest in that? Because so the piece around self-organizing, gatekeeping is something we need to be mindful of. And then that piece around that research that we are talking about, the education and all of those things become really very critical. I know our time, Natasha reminded you of the time. International players, because I think that we've talked about national, and we last week we mentioned that a little bit. Maybe both of you might speak to that, because I think that because a national player, and we're not saying they are not doing something, that we want them to do more, that a lot of the gaps that are missing, many of our international players are actually playing into that. So I guess our question here then would be a provocation to think about for both of you, Haji and Kevin. How are our international players, whether it's a British Council, Africalia, Goethe Institute, Prince Cloud, like all of those cultural diplomatic ties, how are they shaping the art and culture management scene in Nigeria, in Kenya, but more broadly on the continent? Haji, maybe you want to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I will say that, I mean, speaking from our perspective now, that yes, we have definitely benefited from some of the programs or projects from some of these international players. However, I would also say that it's a pity that most institutions, have to depend on these international players, whereas policies could have been made, and we could find a way around, and everyone is fine one way or the other. I mean, maybe not perfect, but fine. But you see a lot of arts institutions, a lot of organizations dependent on what these international players are bringing on board or bringing to the table, and they keep stalling on ideas and projects for the next call. We wait for this, whereas this could have actually been opportunities to do amazing things, collaborate, to do great stuff within the local ecosystem. So how the international players are shaping the art and culture management scene. It's in two ways for me, Yes, you can say that it's probably what you cannot get at home, you're getting it outside, But also he has a lot of disadvantage as well, because I don't know if it's entirely helpful to the beneficiaries, and also the government as well. I wouldn't say that it is entirely helpful. So it's two ways for me. I'm trying to find my words. I'm trying to find the right description, but I would say I am in between. I will not say it's the Messiah and it's it's helping and it's solving the problem. No, I won't say that. But I would say that you say what?
No. I totally get you. So don't worry. Go. Yeah, it's fine.
Let me let Kevin talk, and maybe I'll find my words.
Oh, no, I think it's a tricky question. Because they say he who pays owns
The
it.
piper, yeah, dictate the tune.
So there's that statement, there's that fact. First of all, is to agree that they're playing a critical role. I think these institutions have really played a very important role in the developments of art in Africa. But we have to look at it from a point of an African, a Kenyan point of view, and the money is good. There's a lot of benefit. There's a lot of exposure. But you see, any cultural money that comes in, culture is a way of power. It's soft power. So, and again, so this money comes with a specific agenda. It's coming to push their culture, and that's why we have a lot of cultural infiltration in Africa. Because yes, they will invest the money, but there is a purpose. That money is meant to do something over and above, to maybe educate, to elevate the status of art, but there is some influence, a critical influence that will come with that money. So therefore, in terms of, I want to look at it in terms of art management in Africa. And you'll find that most of people who have benefited from this money and from these grants have a lot of European influence. A lot of it, because that money has come with a specific agenda. That's why you will find a lot of people who eventually benefit from that money, most of them eventually move to Europe, because there's a certain influence that has come with that money. There's certain exposure, without knowing it, you're drawn to that side. You're drawn, let me call it, you're drawn to the West. And therefore, there's that impact of this manager, this management, this something that has been grown, but then it is taken away. And therefore, then the rebuilding has to start over and over again. And that has been the cycle. That's why a lot of people who have excelled in art management in Africa are not in Africa. They are managing art outside Africa. You see, that's the critical thing, because then it means that talent is harnessed but is taken away, and rightly so, because that talent is looking for opportunity. And that's why we have to look. There is no way we can detach art management from capitalism, because it is a capital. It is a workforce that needs labor, that needs to be fed, and that is the disadvantage of having more money from outside than having money from inside. That's the pure disadvantage. And I think that is what the governments need to understand, that if we build our own culture, and I want to say there is a huge desire for African art. Go to any museum in the West. What artworks dominate those museums? What stories are being told right now in films, in documentaries? They're African stories. So there's a disadvantage that comes with that money. It is good. It helps develop. It is active, but there's something that is taken away from. When you look at it from an African perspective, there's something that is taken away. This institution play a very important role, but the important role they play, it is money from their countries, meant to come with an agenda and meant for culture, for a certain influence, and those influence end up going back to the West.
Kevin, do I agree on Hajarat?
I think I have something to say now.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Kevin. I just needed you to start. Okay, so this is a very interesting question. So yes, there is there's influence, there's networking that comes with this. There is the capacity building, there is the access to funding and all of that. And all these are great and has helped a lot. But there's also the power dynamics and dependency risk, that comes with these institutions can unintentionally reinforce asymmetrical relationships, where African organizations become implementers rather than initiators. So they come, well, I said unintentionally. Well, I don't know after that if it's intentional or not, but they become really important and become indirectly begin to play important roles in implementing, this, I would say, ghost policies. And everyone, one way or the other, begin to adapt to it, even our government, so the system changes entirely. So while enabling access and opportunity, these partnerships also more or less inhibit autonomy, if not carefully balanced. And in most cases, it might not be balanced because we become automatically dependent on what is coming. I would say that while we were in Paris, while we were in France, we were getting this 3-year funding, for the organization, and we employ artists and we do our project. But what comes with this funding is that you have to have a project, and they have to be a project. And I work with artists, and my artist wants to create at his will. He doesn't want to be boxed up and say, because this funding is for this, you need to think towards that. And it begins to affect creative process. It begins to affect, the way the artists think. And we just said, you know what, this is it. And we got the funding and we dropped it, and moved down to Nigeria. And I'm not saying this is the greener pasture or anything. There's challenges everywhere. But at the same time, this is what it does, Oh, you have to have a partner that is in this and this country for you to be able to do this project. So it begins to box you up one way or the other. There are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of advantages to this, but it also comes with its own disadvantage.
Absolutely, Aji. I think all we're saying is that we recognize the key role that international players are playing, and we recognize that those gaps that they are filling is also a result of the gaps that are not filled by us, by national players. So all that we're saying is that can our national players wake up to complement what they're doing? Because we know that every of the international players are playing from the perspective of their own cultural diplomatic realities. And yes, they are building capacity. Yes, they are sustaining, our work, our industry, our sector. And there has been so many remarkable opportunities, talents that have been discovered, initiatives, and different things like that. But relying solely on the international partners is not enough. So I think what we're trying to say here is that can we, as a nation, as nations and continents within the sector, our policymakers, our politicians, technocrats and researchers, and every person within the sector that is part of the ecosystem, can we all self-organize and come together? Because if our house is in order, when international partners come, we can dictate the tone, we can dictate the direction. But the moment we don't even have a direction, things just come here and there. It becomes hit and miss. And so even when international players come and there are no necessarily directions set by us, anything goes, and there is no sustainability. So we recognize, we acknowledge, because again, we know the realities of these things, and we acknowledge our international partners and the role that they are playing. But we're saying back to our own nations and our own continent, can we do more? Can we come together, self-organize? Can we think about, research, education? Can we create a structure and a system, invest in these things to help our sector to be able to stand the test of time? So our art councils, our cultural policies, our education systems, every stakeholder, every person within the ecosystem need to come together for us to do this, and do it well. With that, I'll pass it to Natasha. I kind of feel like I'm hopefully my editorializing is helping the talk. I feel like I'm like one of the guests. I'm not. But both of you are you've really offered us really critical thoughts to think about. It's provocative, and you've also said it in matured and very wise way around it, because these are tricky issues that not everybody will even want to talk about. But we also recognize that we can't keep quiet for long. It's really important for us to say it. Who knows who's going to hear it? Maybe your minister in Kenya will hear it, or minister in Nigeria will hear it, or those in the National Art Council and stuff will hear these things, and then maybe this will provoke something. Who knows? Anyway, I'll pass it to Natasha here.
Thank you. In that same vein of, we can't stay quiet for any longer. right? What guidance would you offer emerging arts managers who are passionate, who are feeling the passion, watching this right now, and they're like, okay, you know, they're passionate about driving policy change within the arts and cultural sector. What advice do you give to them right where they are, right in the organizations they are, wherever they are on the continent and beyond? What advice do you give to them? And I'll direct this to Haji first.
Thank you very much. I would firstly say, be the manual that they need, meaning be you as an art manager, be the manual that your artists need to navigate the system. Because we cannot take away the fact that they are creatives and they still have to go through their own process. And you have to go through the process of carrying the bags, the administrative process and all of that. So be the manual they need to pass through that process, you know. So, and of course, secondly, just make research, make a lot of research, and act upon what you within your capacity, what you can act upon. Just do along with your artists, do along with your creatives, but just be their manual, be their guide in the way that your own knowledge, you know, permits to, and make a lot of research around that, because a lot of things are changing all around the world. The world that you are in might be a little bit stagnant, but there are a lot of things changing around that you need to be aware of. So you need to make those researches to help you find your own movement, even when your world is stagnant. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can't agree more. I think for me, I'll say be bold. I think we have to be bold. I think that's the first step. We have to be bold. We have to go for it. We have to self-organize. I think most importantly, we have to self-organize, knowing that I may be in Kenya, but Haji is going through the same challenges I'm going through, you know, and therefore when we find a platform to share and discuss ideas, you know, and have provocate each other, you know, we will get the strength to even be more bolder, to challenge our governments, to challenge those who are in power, to put strategies that are proper, to ensure that whatever policies are they're implemented. Number two, I think it is to study, train, research. I think that's the most important thing. As an art manager, the best thing you can do to yourself is to continue building yourself, because once you build yourself, once you expose yourself more, then you are able to get new dynamics, new perspective of solving the day-to-day challenges, because especially from an African point of view, we are navigating waters that have not been navigated before, you know. We have to make a path for others to follow. Therefore, training, research and study is very important. Number three is to go business, you know, it's a business. Forget the noise about capitalism, you know, those, let's go business. Art is a business. And for us to be taken seriously, especially in Africa, in Kenya, we have to show that this is a profession. It's an actual profession like any other. And that can only be done through going business, you know. It is something that I go to school to, I invest my time in studying, I study, I graduate, and therefore I have to reap all benefits that any other profession needs to reaps from, you know. And that is the only way we're going to be taken serious, especially being coming from a point of an African society where art is part of who we are. And then number three, seek exposure. Let's see the world, see what others are doing, you know. It's really important, very, very important, because that exposure then opens up your eye and open up more opportunities.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Oh, Tyler.
This is amazing. Thanks for, I love the, you know, be the guide, be a guide, be bold, and those things that Kevin did talk about. As we're wrapping this up, I'm reminded, if someone said that a skit making
which is a big thing in Nigeria and other part of the continent, by the way. It's research has shown that like in the past 4 or 5 years, it racked in billions of dollar in revenue. If someone said 10 years ago, you say you're a skit maker and that's your day job, yeah, they're gonna they're gonna go pray for you somewhere. Something is wrong with you. Something is definitely wrong with you. That's what they will say. But now we see, podcasting, we see skit making, we see like these things as that's what they do for living. So, Kevin's idea that we need to think about business, and it's not, when we talk about business, we're not talking about business as, profit making that is destroying the planet, profit making that is making people not being that is devaluing other people. No, we're talking about value proposition. We're talking about seeing it as something to invest in, and then because it's a service, whether we like it or not, even though we love it, it's our hobby, it's intrinsic. As Africans, we love to do these things, it's part of our spirituality and all of that. But hey, it can put food on our table. It's a service. So I think that what both of you are really offering us today, part of that is really, we need to change our worldview here. We need to change our perspective as artists, as art makers, as theater, researchers, as theater managers, as politicians, everyone involved in the ecosystem. There has to be a change of mindset, a change of worldview, a change of perspective. So we want to say thank you, Kevin and Haji, for taking the time to share your realities with us. And thank you for sharing that with this level of generosity and intentionality and carefulness and maturity. These are sensitive topics. We know that. I know that. That we don't want to come close to, because that might impede so many things. But you've clearly laid it out to us for us to see that we have to really engage in this conversation, and hopefully somebody's going to see this, is going to hear this, and that can make them think differently. So with that, I want to say thank you, and all that you're doing in Kenya, in Nigeria, and in other parts of the world. Wishing you all the very success, and we know that you're also mentoring and training other people, in this art. With that, I want to bring this to a close. Special thanks to HowlRound for always, believing in the vision and creating platform, this kind of platform, and also putting resources behind that. Thank you to the Center for Social Engaged Theater for all the administrative support. Thanks to Tara Eldred, who has been the one sort of helping, press the button behind the scene. Thank you to Pan-African Creative Exchange for the support in terms of communications and in terms of publicity and all of that. Thank you to Theatre International and its Social Enterprise Mobile Research Lab, which kind of build the research behind this work. And Kevin was talking about research earlier on. It's a lot of work around research. So I want to thank them. Thanks to Kininso Creative for the support in terms of contact and really supporting us. All these in-kind support, they are very critical. And of course, thanks to La Cité, our French language partner. So thank you at the University of Regina. So thank you to all of our partners. And then I'll pass it on to Natasha for her. Yeah.
Thank you, Taiwo. This was a really great conversation. Really honored to be here and listening to the points that you shared. Feels very inspiring, and I'm excited. I'm hopeful. So I wish you both well. Hope our paths cross again, and thank you.
So thank you so much. And my name is Taiwo Afolabi again, and it's signing out, and see you next week, same time, for the 5th edition. And that 5th edition, I believe we're having French translation. So we're looking forward to that conversation with our guest. Until then. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.